5 days before Thanksgiving, I learned my daughter had planned to humiliate me in front of her friends. I didn't cry that day. I simply stopped being her fool. I stood outside her front door, my hand frozen inches from the wood, listening to words I was never meant to hear. My daughter's voice, sharp, mocking, cruel, sliced through the afternoon air like a blade I didn't see coming. Ugh, you should see the way he dresses, Nathan. Like some bargain bin Santa Claus. That was Marissa. My Marissa. The little girl I'd raised alone after her mother died. The one I'd worked myself half to death for, skipping meals so she could have new textbooks, selling my best tools so she could walk across that graduation stage. I swear, she continued, every time he visits, I have to open a window just to get rid of that old man smell. Then came the laughter. Nathan's smug chuckle, the sound of a man who'd never worked an honest day in his life, who looked at people like me as something he'd scrape off his expensive shoes. Relax, babe, he said. We'll make it funny. You said he still thinks we respect him, right? He's harmless. The box of family photos in my hands suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Old Polaroids of Marissa as a kid, her mother smiling beside the lake, holidays when we didn't have much but we had each other. I'd brought them thinking she might want to display them for Thanksgiving. Thinking she still cared about where she came from. Oh, I know he's harmless, Marissa said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. That same smile she'd give me when I dropped off homemade pies she'd never eat. That's why I planned something special. I told my friends he's coming, and they're bringing cameras. I'm going to make him read a speech before dinner, about how proud he is of me. They don't know he's broke, that I've been sending him pity money for years. There was a pause. Even Nathan seemed to hesitate. That's cruel, Marissa. Cruel. He deserves it. Do you know what it was like growing up poor? Always being embarrassed. Everyone pitied me. Now I get to flip it. He's my charity case. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Something happened to me in that moment. Something fundamental shifted inside my chest, like a gear that had been grinding for years finally snapped clean off. I'd spent 12 years grieving my wife, but that day, standing on my daughter's porch with my heart cracking open, I realized I'd been grieving something else too. The daughter I thought I had. I didn't knock. I didn't confront her. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing the look on my face. I just turned around, walked back to my truck with those photos still clutched in my hands, and sat there staring at the steering wheel. The taste in my mouth was metallic, bitter, like I'd bitten down on something rotten. My hands were shaking, not from anger, not yet, from something deeper. Recognition, maybe. The sudden, horrible clarity that comes when you realize you've been playing the fool in someone else's story. For how long? I wondered. How long had she been laughing at me behind my back? How many of those visits where I drove 2 hours each way, bringing food she'd throw away, staying polite while Nathan condescended to me? How many of those had been jokes she shared with her friends later? I thought about the last Thanksgiving. The one before that. The Christmases where I'd show up with carefully wrapped presents, watching her unwrap them with that same polite smile. The smile that never reached her eyes. The one I'd told myself was just stress from work, from life in the city, from anything except the truth staring me in the face. She was ashamed of me. Not just uncomfortable. Not just distant. Ashamed. My own daughter looked at me the way Nathan did, like I was something broken and outdated, something that reminded her of a past she wanted to erase. I sat in that truck for close to an hour. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, and I watched my breath fog up the windshield. My phone buzzed once, a text from Marissa asking if I'd gotten her Thanksgiving invitation. The irony almost made me laugh. But I didn't laugh. I didn't cry either. Instead, I started the engine and drove home, taking the long way, letting my mind settle into something cold and clear. Because here's what they don't tell you about betrayal. Sometimes it doesn't break you. Sometimes it wakes you up. That night, I went straight to my garage. In the back corner, under old tarps and boxes of Clara's belongings I'd never had the heart to sort through, was a storage trunk. The lock was rusty, but the key still hung on the pegboard where I'd left it 12 years ago. Inside were Clara's journals, our old savings bonds, and something Marissa knew nothing about. Something I'd kept quiet because I never cared about showing off, never needed anyone to know I was anything more than what I appeared to be. A property deed. Before Marissa was born, Clara's father left us a small cabin and several acres of land upstate. Nothing fancy, just trees and quiet. I'd been paying the taxes on it all these years, renting the land to a lumber company for a modest income. It was my secret retirement fund, my safety net, the thing that would have been Marissa's inheritance someday. But 2 years ago, that lumber company struck a natural gas vein. Overnight, that forgotten piece of land became worth close to $2.4 million. Marissa thought I was broke because I let her believe that. I drove an old truck, wore work shirts with my name stitched on the pocket, lived in the same small house I'd raised her in. I didn't care about appearances. I just wanted peace. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had. But sitting there in my garage, holding that deed in my hands, I realized something. Love without respect isn't love at all. It's just pity wearing a mask. And that's when I decided she'd never see me broken again. Would you have confronted her right there, or would you have stayed silent and planned something bigger? Drop your answer in the comments, because what I did next changed everything. I wasn't always the kind of man who sat quietly and took disrespect. There was a time when I had fire in me, when I'd stand up for myself without thinking twice. But grief has a way of softening a man, wearing down his edges until he's too tired to fight anymore. When Clara died, she took half of me with her. We met when I was 22, fresh out of technical school, working at a garage that barely paid minimum wage. She was waitressing at the diner next door, always bringing me coffee during my breaks, never charging me for the extra refills. She had this laugh that sounded like music, the kind that made you want to be the reason for it. We got married 6 months later in a courthouse ceremony with 2 witnesses and no money for rings. Didn't matter. We were young and stupid and completely certain we'd build something beautiful together. And we did. For a while. Marissa came along 3 years later, and watching Clara hold our daughter for the first time, seeing that look on her face, pure love and terror mixed together, that's when I understood what my life was really about. Not fixing cars, not chasing paychecks. It was about protecting these 2 people who'd become my entire world. I worked doubles, sometimes triples. Grease under my fingernails, oil stains on every shirt I owned, back aching so bad some nights I couldn't sleep. But I'd come home to Clara singing in the kitchen and Marissa doing homework at the table, and everything made sense. Marissa was smart. Scary smart. By middle school, she was bringing home awards, acing every test, talking about college like it was a given. Teachers kept telling us she had potential, real potential, the kind that could take her anywhere. Clara and I would lie awake at night, whispering about Marissa's future. Clara wanted her to have everything we didn't, the education, the opportunities, the chance to never worry about money the way we did. She's going to do something incredible, Clara would say, running her fingers through my hair. I can feel it. Long as she's happy, I'd reply. That's all I care about. Clara would smile at that, kiss my forehead. You're too soft, Russell. But that's why I love you. Then Clara got sick. It started with headaches she wouldn't talk about, dizzy spells she'd brush off. By the time she finally agreed to see a doctor, the cancer had already spread. Stage 4. The kind of diagnosis that comes with pamphlets about end-of-life care and sympathetic looks from nurses who've seen this story 100 times. Marissa was 16. Old enough to understand, young enough to fall apart completely. I watched my daughter cry herself to sleep every night for months. Watched her grades slip, watched her pull away from friends, watched her build walls around herself brick by brick. And I couldn't do anything except be there, hold her when she'd let me, and try to keep our family from completely shattering. Clara lasted 8 months after the diagnosis. Near the end, when the morphine made her thoughts fuzzy and disconnected, she'd still grab my hand and whisper the same thing. "Take care of our girl. Promise me." "I promise." I'd say every time. "I promise." Clara died on a Tuesday morning in March. The tulips she'd planted the year before were just starting to bloom, and I remember thinking how cruel that was, that the world just kept going like nothing had happened, like my wife hadn't just stopped breathing in a hospital bed with machines beeping around her. At the funeral, Marissa didn't cry. She stood there in her black dress, staring at the casket with this blank expression that scared me more than tears would have. When it was over, she went to her room and didn't come out for 3 days. That's when everything changed between us. Before Clara died, Marissa and I were close. We'd spend Saturdays working on her old Honda together, me teaching her how to change the oil while she complained about boys at school and dreamed out loud about colleges. She'd steal my tools and hide them just to mess with me, and I'd pretend to be mad but secretly loved it. After Clara died, Marissa became someone else. Distant. Focused. Angry at something she couldn't name. She threw herself into school like her life depended on it. Perfect grades, every extracurricular, college applications that read like novels. When the acceptance letters came, she barely smiled. Just added them to a growing pile on her desk. "I'm going to make something of myself," she told me one night, packing boxes for college. "I'm not staying here." There was venom in those words. Like here meant more than just our small town. Like it meant me, this house, everything that reminded her of loss and struggle and a life she wanted to escape. But I didn't see it then. I was too busy being proud. I sold my best tools, the ones Clara had bought me for our 10th anniversary, expensive German wrenches I'd never thought I'd part with. Pawned Clara's jewelry, the pieces her mother had given her. Skipped meals, worked overtime, borrowed money I'm still paying back. Whatever it took to cover Marissa's tuition. Whatever it took to make Clara's dream come true. Marissa graduated with honors. Marketing degree, job offers from 3 different cities. She picked the one furthest away. "You'll visit, right?" I asked the day she left, helping her load the last boxes into her car. She hugged me quick, perfunctory. "Of course, Dad." But visits were rare. Phone calls became texts. Texts became silence. And when Nathan showed up in her life 2 years later, whatever connection we had left started to crumble completely. I met Nathan exactly once before I overheard that conversation. Marissa had invited me to dinner at some expensive restaurant in the city, the kind with cloth napkins and prices that weren't listed on the menu. Nathan wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. He shook my hand too hard, called me sir in that fake respectful way that meant the opposite, and spent the entire meal talking about investments and market trends like I was supposed to be impressed. Marissa laughed at all his jokes, touched his arm, looked at him the way Clara used to look at me. But when she looked at me, there was something else in her eyes. Something I didn't want to name. Embarrassment. "So you're a mechanic," Nathan said, cutting into his steak. "That's honest work." The way he said honest made it sound like a synonym for simple. 38 years, I said, keeping my voice steady. Fixed everything from lawn mowers to 18-wheelers. "Fascinating," Nathan replied, in a tone that meant the exact opposite. Marissa changed the subject quickly, too quickly, asking Nathan about some project at work. I sat there eating food I couldn't taste, realizing my daughter was ashamed to talk about me. After that dinner, I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there. The way holidays became optional. The way she'd forget to call on my birthday. The way she'd accept my homemade food with a smile and throw it away the moment I left. But I was too stubborn, too hopeful, too desperate to believe my little girl still loved me. So I kept showing up. Kept driving 2 hours each way. Kept bringing Clara's cranberry relish every Thanksgiving, hoping this would be the year things felt like family again. If only I'd known that every sacrifice I made was turning into the thing she'd later despise me for. The first time Marissa forgot to call me on Thanksgiving, I told myself she was just busy. It was 3 years after she'd moved to the city, 2 years after she'd started dating Nathan. I'd been cooking all morning, Clara's turkey recipe, the cranberry relish Marissa used to beg for as a kid, sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow topping she loved. I set the table for 2 out of habit, even though I knew she wasn't coming. Even though she'd sent a text the night before saying she and Nathan had plans with his family. Sorry, Dad. Next year for sure. Next year never came. I ate alone that Thanksgiving, the sounds of the neighbors' kids playing football outside drifting through the window. The turkey was dry because I'd overcooked it waiting for a phone call that never came. The cranberry relish sat untouched in its bowl, looking exactly like it had when Clara made it, and that hurt worse than anything. I threw most of the food away. Kept the cranberry relish in the fridge for 2 weeks before finally admitting she wasn't going to ask for the recipe. That became the pattern. Marissa's life in the city got bigger, shinier, more expensive. Mine stayed exactly the same small house, same old truck, same simple existence. And the distance between us grew with every passing month. She'd post pictures on social media. Fancy restaurants, weekend trips to wine country, charity galas where everyone wore tuxedos and evening gowns. Nathan was always beside her, looking polished and perfect, his arm around her waist like he owned her. The comments would flood in. You two are goals. Living your best life. So glamorous. I'd like the photos from my old phone, leaving simple comments. Beautiful, sweetheart. Proud of you. Sometimes she'd respond with a heart emoji. Usually, she wouldn't respond at all. I tried to stay involved. Called every Sunday like clockwork, even though half the time it went to voicemail. When she did answer, the conversations felt hollow, like she was checking boxes on some obligation list. How's work? I'd ask. Good. Busy. You eating okay? Taking care of yourself? Yeah, Dad. I'm fine. Long silences. The sound of her doing something else while we talked, dishes clattering or television playing in the background. Well, I just wanted to hear your voice, I'd say, trying to keep the hurt out of my own. Okay, I should go. Talk soon. But soon never came. I started making excuses for her. She's building a career. She's young. She needs space to grow. Clara would have understood. Clara would have told me to be patient, to trust that Marissa still loved me even if she didn't show it. So I was patient. 4 years. The few times I did visit, I could feel Nathan's judgment the moment I walked through the door. He'd look at my clothes, clean but worn, nothing fancy because I didn't see the point of fancy, and something would shift in his expression. Like I'd tracked mud onto his expensive carpet just by existing. Russell, he'd say, that fake smile plastered on. Good to see you. Liar. Marissa would be nervous when I visited, constantly tidying things that didn't need tidying, laughing too loud at Nathan's jokes, acting like a different person than the daughter I'd raised. She'd introduce me to their friends at parties. This is my dad, Russell, with an apologetic edge to her voice. Like she needed to explain me, justify me, soften the blow of my presence. Their friends would shake my hand, make small talk about the weather, then find reasons to drift away. I was the odd one out in rooms full of people who measured success by bank accounts and job titles and zip codes. But I kept coming back. Because that's what fathers do. We show up even when we're not wanted, hoping eventually we'll be wanted again. I'd bring food every visit. Clara's recipes, the ones Marissa grew up with. Pot roast, cornbread, that cranberry relish I couldn't seem to stop making even though she never ate it. "You didn't have to do this," she'd say, taking the containers with that same polite smile. "I wanted to," I'd reply. "Your mom's recipes. Thought you might miss them." Something would flicker in her eyes then. Guilt, maybe. Or annoyance. Hard to tell anymore. After I'd leave, I'd text her. "Thanks for having me. Love you, sweetheart." Hours later, sometimes days, she'd respond. "Love you too." 3 words. No punctuation. No warmth. Just obligation wrapped in a text message. I started noticing other things. How she'd steer conversations away from her childhood. How she'd describe her upbringing to Nathan's friends as modest or humble, words that made it sound quaint instead of what it really was, poor. We were poor. I'd worked myself half to death to hide it from her, but we both knew the truth. Hand-me-down clothes, generic brand groceries, Christmas presents from the clearance rack. We made it work because we had to, because we had love even when we didn't have money. But now Marissa talked about those years like they were something she'd survived instead of lived. Like growing up in that small house with a single father who smelled like motor oil was a hardship she'd overcome rather than the foundation that built her. It stung. Every time. One Christmas, I gave her a photo album. Pictures from her childhood, birthday parties, school plays, camping trips where we'd slept in a tent that leaked. Her and Clara baking cookies, flour everywhere, both of them laughing. She flipped through it quickly, smiled that empty smile. "Thanks, Dad. This is sweet." The album disappeared into a closet. When I asked about it 6 months later, she said she couldn't remember where she'd put it. That's when I started to understand. My daughter wasn't just distant. She was erasing me, editing her history to fit the life she wanted instead of the one she had. And I let her. Because I didn't know what else to do. So when that Thanksgiving invitation came, the one that said, "Dress nicely," like I'd shown up in rags before, I jumped at it. Convinced myself this was progress, that maybe she was finally ready to include me in her new life properly. I bought new clothes. Spent money I didn't need to spend on a shirt and tie and shoes that pinched my feet. Practiced what I'd say to her friends, how I'd introduce myself without embarrassing her. I wanted so badly to be someone she could be proud of. Someone who fit into her world. I just didn't realize she'd already decided I never would. But that year, she sent an invitation that felt different. The text came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reorganizing my garage. "Dad, this year Thanksgiving's at my place. Nathan wants to host. Can you come around 3 p.m.? Dress nicely." I read it 3 times, my phone screen lighting up my face in the dim garage. Those 2 words at the end, "dress nicely," they stuck in my throat like something sharp. She'd never said that before. Never felt the need to tell me how to present myself. What changed? But instead of letting that question settle into something heavy, I pushed it aside. Told myself she was just being thoughtful, that maybe Nathan's family would be there and she wanted everything to look proper. That made sense. Right. I texted back immediately. "Wouldn't miss it. Thanks for inviting me." She didn't respond. But that was normal now. I'd gotten used to her silence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a beer I barely touched, staring at Clara's picture on the mantel. It was her favorite photo, taken at the lake the summer before Marissa was born, sun setting behind her, that smile that made everything worth it. "She invited me," I said out loud to the empty room, to Clara's frozen smile. "Maybe things are getting better." The photograph didn't answer. But I convinced myself Clara would have been happy about this. Would have told me to give Marissa grace, to believe in the daughter we'd raised together. I went shopping the next morning. Hit the department store in town, the one I usually avoided because everything felt too expensive and too unnecessary. But this was different. This was important. I found a button-down shirt, light blue, nothing fancy, but new. A tie that the sales lady said was classic. Shoes that weren't work boots, actual dress shoes that made my feet feel strange and confined. In the dressing room, I looked at myself in the mirror. The shirt fit okay. The tie hung straight. I looked respectable. Like someone's father who belonged at a nice Thanksgiving dinner. For Marissa, I said to my reflection. The man staring back at me looked hopeful and desperate and about 10 years older than I remembered. I bought everything. Spent more than I'd spent on clothes in the past 5 years combined. Drove home with the bags on the passenger seat, already planning what I'd say when I walked in. How I'd compliment Nathan's house, thank them for including me, be the version of myself that made Marissa comfortable instead of ashamed. I wanted this to work. Wanted it so badly, I ignored every instinct telling me something was off. That weekend, I practiced. Stood in front of my bathroom mirror in the new shirt and tie, rehearsing conversations. Nathan, the house looks great. Marissa, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm very proud of everything she's accomplished. Simple phrases. Harmless small talk. But I repeated them like lines in a play, trying to smooth out my rough edges, trying to be someone who fit into their polished world. Sunday morning, I made Clara's cranberry relish. Same recipe I'd been making for 20 years, the one Marissa used to sneak spoonfuls of before dinner. I knew she probably wouldn't eat it, knew it would probably end up in the trash like always, but I made it anyway. Hope's funny like that. It makes you do the same thing over and over, expecting different results. I put the relish in a nice container, wrapped it carefully. Added it to my mental list of things to bring. Cranberry relish, wine bottle Nathan would probably judge as cheap, and myself dressed up like a man trying too hard. Monday and Tuesday passed in a blur. I cleaned my truck inside and out, vacuumed floors that didn't need vacuuming, wiped down the dashboard until it shined. Wanted everything to be perfect. Wanted to show up looking like someone who had his life together. Tuesday night, I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about what Thanksgiving used to be. Clara singing while she cooked, Marissa setting the table wrong on purpose just to make us laugh, the three of us squished together on the couch after dinner watching football. When did it all change? When did holidays become something to survive instead of celebrate? But I pushed those thoughts down. Reminded myself tomorrow was a new start. A chance to rebuild what we'd lost. Wednesday morning, I woke up early. Too early. Made coffee I didn't drink, paced the kitchen, checked the time every 15 minutes like that would make it move faster. Around noon, I decided to stop by Marissa's early. Not to attend Thanksgiving, that wasn't until tomorrow, but to drop off the box of family photos I'd found in the garage. Old Polaroids from when Marissa was a kid, pictures of Clara I thought she might want to display. It was an excuse, really. A reason to see her before the big day, to gauge her mood, to make sure I was reading this invitation right. I loaded the box into my truck, drove the 2 hours to her neighborhood with its perfect lawns and expensive cars. Her house stood out. Modern, clean lines, the kind of place I'd never belonged but desperately wanted to. Her car was in the driveway. Nathan's too. Good. They were home. I grabbed the box, walked up the path, noticed the way my work boots looked wrong against the polished concrete. Noticed how even the doormat probably cost more than my kitchen table. I could hear voices inside. Laughter. Marissa's voice distinct and clear. I raised my hand to knock. And that's when my entire world collapsed. Ugh, you should see the way he dresses, Nathan. I froze. Hand still raised. Heart suddenly loud in my ears. Like some bargain bin Santa Claus. That was my daughter. My Marissa. talking about me like I was a joke she couldn't wait to share. My hand dropped. The box of photos felt impossibly heavy. And I stood there, listening to my daughter plan my humiliation, while the man I used to be started dying right there on that perfect doorstep. But fate doesn't hand you peace, it hands you truth, dressed in cruelty. I should have knocked. Should have confronted her right there, demanded an explanation, forced her to look me in the eye while she explained how I'd become something to mock. But I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My boots felt glued to that concrete porch while my daughter's voice kept slicing through the door. I swear, every time he visits, I have to open a window just to get rid of that old man smell. Old man smell. I looked down at myself. Clean shirt I'd worn to drive here. Jeans I'd washed that morning. Same soap I'd used for 40 years, same deodorant, same aftershave Clara used to say she loved. When did I start smelling like something that needed to be aired out? Nathan's laugh cut through my thoughts. That low, smug chuckle that made my jaw clench every time I heard it. Relax, babe. We'll make it funny. You said he still thinks we respect him, right? A pause. Long enough for hope to flicker that maybe she'd defend me. Maybe she'd tell him he was wrong, that I was her father and deserved better than this. Oh, I know he's harmless. That's why I planned something special. The hope died. I told my friends he's coming, and they're bringing cameras. My stomach dropped. Cameras. She wanted this documented. Wanted to immortalize whatever humiliation she had planned. I'm going to make him read a speech before dinner, Marissa continued, her voice bright with excitement that made me sick. About how proud he is of me. They don't know he's broke, that I've been sending him pity money for years. Pity money. The checks she'd send sometimes, $20 or $40 with little notes saying, "Treat yourself, Dad," or "Buy something nice." I thought they were kindness. Thought my daughter still cared enough to help out her old man. They were charity. Handouts to ease her guilt. Proof she could point to later and say, "See, I take care of him." That's cruel, Marissa. Thank God for Nathan's conscience. At least someone in that house had one. But Marissa laughed. Actually laughed. Cruel. He deserves it. Do you know what it was like growing up poor? Always being embarrassed. Everyone pitied me. I closed my eyes. Saw her at 7 years old, crying because we couldn't afford the class field trip. Saw me picking up extra shifts that week, surprising her with the permission slip signed and the money in an envelope. Saw her face light up like I'd given her the world. When did that little girl start resenting me for trying? Now I get to flip it, she said. He's my charity case. The box slipped from my hands. Hit the porch with a soft thud. I stood there waiting for them to hear it, to open the door and find me standing there with everything broken open between us. But they didn't. The house was too big, too insulated, too removed from reality for them to notice one old man falling apart on their doorstep. I picked up the box. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it again. I turned around. Walked back to my truck on legs that didn't feel like mine. Got in. Set the box on the passenger seat where all those family photos smiled up at me, frozen in a happiness that apparently never existed. The drive home took forever and no time at all. I don't remember most of it. Don't remember getting on the highway or taking my exit or pulling into my driveway. I just remember sitting there in the dark garage with the engine still running, staring at nothing, tasting something bitter and metallic like blood. My phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. Got your RSVP. So excited for tomorrow. It's going to be perfect. Perfect. I turned the phone face down. Turned off the engine. Sat in the silence that felt louder than screaming. How long had she felt this way? How many visits had I made where she was counting down the minutes until I left? How many times had she smiled to my face while planning jokes at my expense behind my back? I thought about every conversation I'd misread, every polite smile I'd mistaken for love, every time I'd driven home feeling confused by her distance, telling myself I was imagining things, that I was being oversensitive. I wasn't imagining anything. I'd just been too desperate to see the truth. The photos sat beside me. I pulled one out. Marissa at 6 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a fish she'd caught on our camping trip. She'd made me take 12 pictures from different angles because she was so proud. When did that pride turn to shame? Clara stared up at me from another photo, her hand on Marissa's shoulder. Both of them laughing at something I'd said behind the camera. "I'm sorry," I whispered to her frozen smile. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect her from becoming this. But maybe that wasn't my fault. Maybe Marissa had made her own choices. Maybe success and money and Nathan's polished world had shown her something she wanted more than the father who raised her. Maybe I just hadn't been enough." That thought hurt worse than anything she'd said. That quiet acceptance that I was insufficient. That my love, my sacrifice, my whole life dedicated to her happiness had been weighed and measured and found lacking. I got out of the truck, left the photos in the passenger seat, walked into my house that suddenly felt too empty and too full of memories at the same time, made it to the kitchen before my legs gave out, sat down hard on the linoleum, back against the cabinet, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back on that porch. Not anger yet. Just grief. The kind of grief that comes when you realize you've already lost someone, but you're still breathing. I sat there for hours, until my legs went numb, until the kitchen window showed complete darkness outside, until the house settled into the silence of a man who'd just learned his daughter saw him as entertainment for her friends. Then I stood up, walked to the garage, found the old trunk Clara and I had stored away 12 years ago, and I opened it. That's the moment I realized my daughter didn't just stop loving me. She stopped seeing me as human. Retry GF. The trunk smelled like dust and memories, like time sealed away from the world, waiting for someone to finally acknowledge it existed. Inside were Clara's journals, leather-bound books she'd written in every night before bed. Her handwriting filled the pages, neat, careful loops that made my chest ache just looking at them. I'd never been able to read them after she died. Couldn't handle seeing her thoughts preserved while she wasn't. Beneath the journals were old savings bonds we'd bought when Marissa was born. Face value maybe $5,000 now. Not much, but more than Marissa thought I had. And under everything else, wrapped in plastic to protect it from moisture, was the property deed. I pulled it out. The paper had yellowed slightly around the edges, but the ink was still clear. 43 acres of land upstate, transferred to Clara and me from her father's estate before Marissa was born. We'd visited that cabin exactly twice. Once when Clara's father died and we had to go through his things. Once more when Marissa was 3, a weekend trip that ended early because the place had no electricity and Marissa wouldn't stop crying. After that, we forgot about it. Life got busy, bills piled up, and 43 acres of trees and silence seemed irrelevant compared to keeping food on the table. But I'd kept paying the taxes. Every year, like clockwork. Used the rental income from the lumber company to cover it, sometimes with a little left over that went into savings. It was my safety net, my quiet insurance policy against disaster. Then 2 years ago, the lumber company called with news. They'd been doing geological surveys, routine stuff, checking soil stability for their equipment. Found something unexpected. Natural gas. A significant deposit. The representative explained it to me over the phone using words I barely understood. Mineral rights, extraction potential, market value. Said they wanted to renegotiate the lease terms, increase the payments substantially. I asked how substantially. He named a number that made me sit down. I hired a lawyer. First time in my life I'd ever needed one. Had him verify everything, make sure I wasn't being scammed or taken advantage of. Took 3 months of back and forth before we reached an agreement. The land was now worth approximately $2.4 million. I told no one. Not because I was hiding it, but because it didn't matter. Money couldn't bring Clara back. Couldn't make Marissa call more often. Couldn't fix the fundamental loneliness that had settled into my bones after my wife died. So I just kept living my simple life. Same small house, same old truck, same work shirts with oil stains. The money sat in accounts I barely looked at, growing quietly while I aged. I'd planned to leave it all to Marissa. Had my will updated, everything arranged. Thought someday, maybe when I was gone, she'd understand that her poor father had been thinking of her future the whole time. But sitting there in my garage, holding that deed while her cruel words echoed in my head, something fundamental shifted inside me. She thought I was broke. Thought she was sending me pity money to help her pathetic father survive. Thought I was some charity case she could parade in front of her friends for laughs. She wanted to humiliate me because I'd embarrassed her by being poor. Except I wasn't poor. I just never cared about showing off. And that realization, that she'd judged me, mocked me, planned to shame me publicly based on assumptions she'd never bothered to verify, it ignited something I thought had died when Clara did. Anger. Pure, cold, clarifying anger. Not the hot kind that makes you yell or break things. The quiet kind that sharpens your thoughts and steadies your hands. The kind that makes a man stop forgiving and start planning. I spread the deed out on my workbench. Traced my finger over Clara's father's signature, over our names written side by side like a promise we'd made to build something lasting. What should I do? I asked out loud, talking to Clara like she could hear me. What would you want? The garage didn't answer. But I knew what Clara would say if she could. She'd be heartbroken. She'd cry for the daughter we'd raised together, for the little girl who'd somehow grown into someone capable of such cruelty. But Clara also had a spine made of steel when it mattered. She'd stood up to her own family when they'd criticized her for marrying a mechanic. Told them love mattered more than money, and if they couldn't understand that, they weren't welcome in her life. She'd have told Marissa the same thing. I picked up my phone. Opened my contact list. Found the lawyer who'd handled the land deal. It was 10 at night, but I called anyway. Left a voicemail. Dave, it's Russell Hargrove. I need to talk to you about my estate. Soon as possible. Need to make some changes. I hung up. Sat there breathing slowly, feeling something settle into place. Maybe every fool needs a moment to stop forgiving. The next morning, Dave called back. We talked for an hour. I explained what I wanted, carefully, precisely, making sure every detail was legally sound. He asked if I was sure. Asked if I wanted to think about it longer. I've thought about it enough, I said. By noon, we had a plan. By 3, the paperwork was being drafted. By evening, I'd signed documents that would change everything. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror that night. Same face, same grease-stained hands, same man I'd always been. But something in my eyes had changed. The hope was gone. The desperate need to be loved by someone who'd stopped seeing me as human. In its place was something harder. Something that wouldn't break again. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. Tomorrow, Marissa would expect me to walk into her house dressed nicely, read her humiliating speech, smile while her friends took pictures of the poor father who didn't know he was the punchline. And I'd do it. I'd walk in. I'd smile. But I'd be carrying something she'd never expect. The truth. Wrapped up in legal documents and tied with the kind of justice that doesn't burn hot, it freezes. She thought she was mocking a poor man. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear. I woke up at 5, couldn't sleep anyway, lay in bed watching dawn light creep across the ceiling. Today was the day. The day I'd find out if I could actually go through with this. Part of me, the part that had loved Marissa from the moment she was born, that had sacrificed everything to give her a better life, that part wanted to call her. Wanted to tell her I'd heard everything, give her a chance to explain, to apologize, to be the daughter I'd raised instead of the woman she'd become. But I'd tried that approach my whole life. Given second chances until I ran out of chances to give. Forgiven before I was asked. Made excuses for behavior that didn't deserve excuses. Not this time. I got up. Made coffee I didn't drink. Stood in the kitchen staring at the container of cranberry relish I'd made, sitting on the counter like a monument to my own stupidity. She wouldn't eat it. Never did. But I'd kept making it year after year, hoping this time would be different. I threw it in the trash. The new shirt and tie hung on my closet door where I'd left them. Clean, pressed, ready to help me play the part she expected. The fool who didn't know he was being mocked. The charity case grateful for any scraps of attention from his successful daughter. I got dressed slowly. Buttoned the shirt with steady hands. Tied the tie in a perfect Windsor knot Clara had taught me 40 years ago. Looked at myself in the mirror, and saw a man ready for war disguised as dinner. The envelope sat on my kitchen table. Plain manila folder, nothing special about it. Inside were copies of everything Dave had prepared. The property deed, the donation paperwork, legal documents that would strip away every assumption Marissa had made about me. I picked it up. Held it for a long moment, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. This would destroy whatever relationship we had left. Would burn the bridge completely, no way to rebuild it. Once I walked out of her house today, I'd never be welcome there again. But maybe that bridge was already ash. Maybe I was just finally admitting what had been true for years. I grabbed my truck keys. Walked out to the driveway. Sat behind the wheel with the engine idling, giving myself one last chance to change my mind. My phone buzzed. Text from Marissa. Can't wait to see you. Remember, 3 p.m. sharp. I stared at those words. The fake enthusiasm. The exclamation points like decorations on a lie. Started the truck. Pulled out of the driveway. Headed toward the city and the performance we'd both be giving. The drive took 2 hours. I spent them rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd say it. Practiced keeping my voice calm, measured, free of the anger that wanted to break through. This wasn't about yelling or making a scene. This was about dignity. About showing my daughter exactly who she'd underestimated. I arrived at 3 exactly. Her neighborhood looked the same as always. Perfect lawns, expensive cars, the kind of wealth that whispered instead of shouted. My old truck looked wrong parked on her street, but I didn't care anymore. I grabbed the envelope. Walked up that perfect concrete path. Raised my hand and knocked. Nathan answered. Fake smile already in place, hand extended for a handshake that meant nothing. Russell. Right on time. Come in, come in. The house was full. Her friends clustered in the living room, wine glasses in hand, dressed like they were attending some fashion show instead of Thanksgiving dinner. They turned when I walked in, and I saw it immediately, the barely concealed amusement in their eyes. The looks they exchanged with each other. They knew. They were all in on it. Dad. Marissa appeared from the kitchen, stunning in a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She hugged me, and I let her, even though it felt like being embraced by a stranger. You look nice, she said, stepping back to examine me. Approval in her voice like I'd passed some test. Thank you, sweetheart. She led me through the house, introducing me to people whose names I didn't bother remembering. They shook my hand, said polite things, and I could see the cameras ready. Phones positioned for the perfect angle to capture whatever humiliation she had planned. Nathan handed me a glass of wine I didn't want. Marissa kept touching my arm, guiding me around like I might get lost in her house, playing the dutiful daughter for her audience. Everyone found their seats around the massive dining table. Turkey at the center, sides arranged like some magazine spread, everything polished and perfect and fake. Marissa stood, clinked her glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. The room went quiet. Phones lifted slightly, ready to record. "Before we eat," she announced, smile bright and sharp, "my dad has something to say. He prepared a little speech for us." All eyes turned to me, expectant, eager for the show. I stood slowly, reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out not the speech she expected, but the folded paper I'd written last night in my garage. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady. "Yes, I do have something to share." I unfolded the paper, looked around the room at all these strangers who thought they were about to watch an old man embarrass himself, and I began to read. If she wanted a performance, I'd give her one, just not the kind she expected. This year, I wanted to express my gratitude. My voice filled the silent room. Every phone was pointed at me. Every face wore that same expression of amused anticipation. To my daughter Marissa, who reminded me that love without respect is just weakness. I saw her face change, confusion replacing the confident smile. Her eyes darted to Nathan, then back to me, and to her husband, Nathan, who taught me that money without integrity is poverty of the soul. The room's temperature dropped. Someone coughed. Phones lowered slightly. "Dad," Marissa started, her voice uncertain. "What are you?" I held up a hand. Calm. Controlled. "I'm not finished." She closed her mouth. I could see her hands starting to shake, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "You see, I came here today not to eat, but to say goodbye." Dead silence. Not even breathing. Clara and I once dreamed that this family would be built on love. I thought that dream died with her 12 years ago. But now I see it still alive, just buried under greed and pride. I looked directly at her friends. Saw the confusion on their faces, the dawning realization that this wasn't the script they'd been promised. "You all should know something. Marissa's father may dress like a mechanic, but he's not a fool." I paused. Let that sink in. 2 days ago, I came by to drop off family photos. Old pictures of Marissa as a child, her mother smiling beside her. I thought she might want them for today. But before I could knock, I heard something interesting. Marissa went pale. Absolute ghost white. I heard my daughter explaining to her husband how I dress like bargain bin Santa Claus. How I smell like an old man. How she'd planned this whole evening as entertainment for her friends. How she'd make me read a speech about being proud of her, while you all took pictures of the poor father who didn't know he was the joke. Someone gasped. Chairs shifted. I saw several of her friends putting down their phones, looking uncomfortable. Nathan tried to interrupt. "Russell, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said quietly. I heard every word. Her charity case, she called me. The pity money she sends to help her broke father survive. I turned to look directly at Marissa. Tears were starting in her eyes, but I couldn't stop now. "Here's what you didn't know, sweetheart. What you never bothered to ask about because you were too busy being ashamed of where you came from." I pulled out the envelope, set it on the table between us. "Your grandfather left your mother and me 43 acres upstate. Nothing fancy, just a cabin and some trees. I've been paying taxes on it quietly, renting the land to a lumber company. You thought I was broke because I dressed simple and drove an old truck. Because I didn't care about impressing people with money I didn't need to spend. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. 2 years ago, that lumber company struck a natural gas vein on that property. Overnight, those 43 acres became worth approximately $2.4 million. I heard someone drop their wine glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor. I never told you because it didn't matter. Because I thought you loved me for who I was, not what I had. I was saving it all for you. Every penny. Planned to leave it to you when I died so you'd be set for life. Tears were streaming down her face now. Dad, please. But today, I'm signing over all my property and inheritance. Not to you. To a foundation in your mother's name. For children who grow up poor and embarrassed by nothing except the cruelty of others. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, chairs scraping as people shifted uncomfortably. Marissa covered her face with her hands. Nathan looked like he'd been punched. I placed the envelope on the table. Right next to the untouched turkey and perfect sides she'd arranged to impress people who didn't matter. You were ashamed of where you came from. Ashamed of the sacrifices your mother and I made so you could have more than we did. Ashamed of a father who loved you enough to work himself half to death for your happiness. My voice cracked slightly. First time all day. I steadied it. Now you'll have to live with the kind of shame money can't erase. The shame of knowing exactly what you threw away. I looked around the table one last time. At the friends who wouldn't meet my eyes. At Nathan, who looked like he wanted to disappear. At the daughter I'd raised, broken and crying in her expensive dress. Clara would have been devastated to see what you became. But she'd be proud of what I'm doing now. Building something that honors where we came from instead of running from it. I picked up my jacket. Started toward the door. Dad, wait. Marissa stood, stumbling slightly. Please, I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said without turning around. That's the problem. You meant every word. I opened the door. Cold November air hit my face. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. Enjoy your perfect house and your expensive wine and your friends who'll be talking about this for months. Just remember, you didn't lose a charity case today. I looked back one final time. Met her eyes. You lost the last person who would have loved you without conditions. And no amount of money will ever buy that back. When I placed that envelope on the table, I wasn't leaving just a deed. I was leaving behind every piece of me she'd taken for granted. I drove home in complete silence. No radio, no music, nothing except the sound of my truck's engine and my own breathing. My hands were steady on the wheel. No shaking, no tears, no regret. Just empty calm, like after a storm passes and leaves everything quiet. I'd done it. Actually gone through with it. Walked away from my only child knowing I'd never walk back. The sun was setting by the time I pulled into my driveway. Same small house I'd lived in for 40 years. Same cracked sidewalk. Same mailbox with my name painted on it in letters Clara had done herself before Marissa was born. Nothing had changed. And everything had changed. I sat in the truck for a while, engine off, watching darkness settle over my neighborhood. Somewhere down the street, I could hear laughter. A family gathering, probably. Thanksgiving the way it was supposed to be, warm and real and full of people who actually wanted to be together. My phone had been buzzing in my pocket the whole drive. I'd ignored it. Now I pulled it out. 15 missed calls from Marissa. 23 text messages. I didn't read them. Turned the phone off. Went inside. The house felt different. Lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying weight I didn't realize was there until I finally set it down. I made myself a sandwich. Ate it standing at the kitchen counter. Threw the container of cranberry relish in the trash where it belonged. No more making food for someone who'd never appreciate it. That night, I slept better than I had in years. 3 days later, the first letter arrived. Not from Marissa, from Nathan. I recognized his handwriting on the envelope. Neat, expensive-looking, the kind of penmanship rich people learn in private schools. Part of me wanted to throw it away, unopened. But curiosity won. Russell, it started. Not Dear Russell, or Mr. Hargrove. Just my name, stripped of respect he'd never really given anyway. I'm writing to ask you to reconsider your decision regarding the property. Marissa is devastated. She hasn't eaten in days. She cries constantly. She knows what she said was wrong and wants the chance to apologize properly. I could read the real message between the lines. She's panicking because she lost millions of dollars. Because her friends saw her get exposed. Because the perfect life she'd built came crashing down in front of witnesses. She loves you, Nathan wrote. She's just been under a lot of stress. The things she said came from a place of pain, not truth. Please, give her another chance. For the sake of your relationship. I folded the letter. Put it in a drawer. Never replied. 2 more letters came that week. Then phone calls to my lawyer, asking about the donation, trying to find loopholes. Dave handled them all. Told them what I'd told him to say. The decision was final. The paperwork legally binding. End of discussion. A month passed. Then 2. The calls stopped. The letters stopped. The silence stretched out like a wound healing slowly. I sold my house. Couldn't stay there anymore, surrounded by memories of a family that didn't exist. Used the money to move upstate permanently, to the cabin Clara's father had left us all those years ago. It needed work. Roof leaked, plumbing was shot, electrical was ancient. But it was mine. Quiet. Peaceful. No neighbors close enough to bother me. Just trees and sky and the sound of wind through leaves. I spent my days fixing the place up. Relearning skills I'd forgotten, working with my hands the way I'd done my whole life. Felt good. Purposeful. Like building something that mattered instead of just surviving. The foundation launched 6 months later. Clara Hargrove Memorial Fund, dedicated to helping kids from low-income families afford college. I'd worked with Dave to structure it properly, hired people who knew what they were doing, set up scholarships and grants and programs. Started seeing the impact almost immediately. News articles about kids getting help. Families sending thank you letters. Schools praising the program. I kept every letter. Pinned them up in my cabin's kitchen, covering the walls with stories of people whose lives changed because I'd chosen to honor Clara's memory instead of rewarding cruelty. One letter stood out. From a teenage girl whose single father worked as a janitor. She'd been accepted to college but couldn't afford it. The foundation covered her full tuition. Your wife must have been an amazing person, she wrote. Thank you for turning your resources into hope for people like me. My dad cried when we found out. He said someone finally understood what it means to work hard and still struggle. Please tell Mrs. Hargrove's family that her legacy is changing lives. I read that letter 3 times. Cried a little. Not from sadness, but from something else. Certainty, maybe. That I'd made the right choice. Clara would have loved this. Would have been proud. Marissa never visited. Never wrote. I'd see her occasionally on social media. Posts about her job, pictures of trips, carefully curated images of a life that looked perfect from the outside. Nathan disappeared from her photos after a few months. Divorce. Probably. Not surprising. She never mentioned me. Never acknowledged what happened. Just moved forward like I'd never existed. And that was fine. I'd made my peace with it. Last week, I got a notification. The foundation had helped its 100th student. a milestone worth celebrating. I set the table for two that evening, made a simple dinner, opened a bottle of wine Clara and I had been saving for a special occasion that never came while she was alive, poured 2 glasses, set one across from me at the empty chair. We did it, I said to the silence. We built something that matters. The cabin creaked in the wind. Somewhere outside, an owl called. I sat there with my wine and my memories and my peace, understanding something I'd never understood before. Sometimes, silence screams louder than anger ever could. Thanksgiving came around again. 1 full year since the day that changed everything. I woke up early in the cabin, watched sunrise paint the trees gold and orange through my kitchen window. The same trees Clara's father had walked through decades ago. The same land that had accidentally become my salvation. I made coffee. Real coffee, the good kind I'd started buying after I moved here. Sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, breathing in cold November air that smelled like pine and coming snow. No texts from Marissa. No letters from Nathan. No drama, no expectations, no performances required. Just quiet. Some people might think that's sad. Spending holidays alone, no family gathering, no grandchildren running around. And maybe it would be, if I were still the man I used to be. The one who measured his worth by whether his daughter loved him. But I wasn't that man anymore. Around noon, I started cooking. Nothing fancy, just Clara's old recipes, the ones I'd memorized by heart. Turkey breast for one, stuffing the way she made it with extra sage, green beans simple and plain, and cranberry relish. Not for Marissa this time. Just because I liked it. Because Clara liked it. Because some traditions are worth keeping even when the people you kept them for are gone. I set the table carefully. 2 plates, 2 forks, 2 glasses of wine. 1 seat for me. 1 for Clara, even though she'd been gone 12 years. Happy Thanksgiving, I said to her empty chair. I like to think she would have smiled at that. Would have understood why I was here alone instead of at Marissa's table pretending everything was fine. I ate slowly. Savored every bite. No rush, no schedule, no pressure to impress anyone or prove anything. The cabin was warm. The food was good. Outside, the first snow of the season had started falling. Perfect. After dinner, I cleaned up. Washed the dishes by hand even though I had a dishwasher. Dried them carefully. Put everything away in its proper place. Then I pulled out the latest update from the foundation. Reports on student progress, financial statements showing how the money was being used, photographs of kids who'd received scholarships. 106 students now. Most of them first-generation college attendees. Kids whose parents worked multiple jobs, who knew what it meant to stretch every dollar, who understood that education was the only way out of poverty. Kids like Marissa used to be, before she forgot where she came from. I read every profile. Memorized their names. These were Clara's legacy now. Not the daughter who'd rejected everything we stood for, but these strangers who'd never met her and still benefited from her memory. That felt right. More right than anything had felt in years. My phone buzzed. For a second, I thought maybe it was Marissa. Maybe after a year of silence, she'd finally found the courage to reach out. But it was just a spam call. I deleted it. Turned the phone off. Didn't need interruptions today. As evening settled in, I built a fire in the fireplace. Sat in Clara's old rocking chair, the one I'd brought from our house, the one she'd nursed Marissa in when she was a baby, and watched flames dance against the stones. Thought about all the Thanksgivings that came before. The ones with Clara alive and smiling. The ones with young Marissa excited about everything. The ones after Clara died when Marissa and I tried to hold things together. The ones where I sat alone in my old house, hoping next year would be different. This Thanksgiving wasn't like any of those. This one was mine. Built on honesty instead of hope. On dignity instead of desperation. And I was grateful. Genuinely, deeply grateful. Not for the money, though that had given me options. Not for revenge, though some people would call it that. I was grateful for the pain that taught me peace. For the betrayal that freed me from delusion. For the courage to walk away from someone I loved when staying would have destroyed what was left of my self-respect. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what actually mattered. The fire crackled. Snow fell outside. I rocked slowly in Clara's chair, feeling something settle in my chest. Not happiness exactly. Just contentment. The quiet knowledge that I'd done the right thing, even when it was hard. She might come back someday, I said out loud to Clara. Might realize what she lost and try to fix it. The fire popped in response. But even if she does, it won't be the same. Can't be. Some bridges burn completely, and you just have to accept the ashes. I thought about that speech I'd given at her table. The looks on everyone's faces. Marissa crying in her expensive dress. Nathan realizing exactly how badly he'd underestimated the old mechanic. I didn't regret it. Not even a little. Because respect is worth more than money. Love without respect is just manipulation dressed up pretty. And family doesn't mean blind loyalty, it means mutual honor. When that breaks, walking away isn't betrayal. It's survival. I finished my wine. Banked the fire for the night. Looked at Clara's picture on the mantel, that same photo from the lake, her smile frozen in time. We did okay, I told her. Raised her the best we could. If she chose to become someone else, that's on her. But we didn't fail. We loved her right. She just didn't know how to love us back the same way. I kissed my fingers. Pressed them to the photo frame. Good night, sweetheart. Thanks for the life we built. Thanks for the daughter we had, even if I lost her later. Thanks for teaching me that dignity matters more than being loved by people who can't see your worth. I turned off the lights. Climbed into bed in my quiet cabin surrounded by trees and peace and hard-won wisdom. And as I drifted off to sleep, I realized something. I'd been searching my whole life for the wrong thing. Not happiness or money or even love. Just peace. The kind of peace that comes when you stop apologizing for who you are. When you stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. When you finally understand that being alone is better than being diminished. Thanksgiving would come again next year. And the year after that. And every year until I was gone. I'd probably spend most of them alone. Maybe all of them. And that was okay. Because sometimes, to reclaim your worth, you have to let your own blood learn what it means to lose you. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply living well and finding peace where cruelty used to live. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that your worth isn't determined by people who can't see it, then share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear that silence isn't weakness, it's strength that speaks when words fail. That walking away from toxicity isn't giving up, it's finally choosing yourself. Subscribe to this channel because we're going to keep bringing you real stories about real people who found the courage to stop being doormats and started being the heroes of their own lives. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might be exactly what you need to hear on the day you need to hear it most. And drop a comment below. Tell us your story. Tell us about the time you walked away from someone who didn't deserve you. Tell us about finding peace after betrayal. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. You might be the reason someone finally finds the courage to choose dignity over desperation. We're building a family here. A family that understands respect matters. That love without honor is worthless. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and never look back. Welcome to the family. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And your worth was never up for debate.